The morning mist clung to the valleys of Gangwon Province like a silk shroud, masking the moment that would forever change humanity's place in the cosmos. Park Ranger Hyun-woo Kim adjusted his binoculars, watching the sunrise paint the abandoned Daewon Research Institute in shades of amber and gold. The facility had been empty for 3 years since the government cut funding, its modernist concrete structure now a monument to bureaucratic neglect. Something was different today. Hyun-woo had patrolled these mountains for 8 years, long enough to know every bird call, every shadow pattern, every way the light should fall across the valley at dawn. The old research building stood exactly where it always had, but somehow it felt occupied. Not by the usual teenage explorers or homeless drifters who occasionally sought shelter in abandoned places, but by something far more deliberate. Probably just my imagination, he muttered, lowering the binoculars. But as he turned to continue his morning rounds, a brief flash caught his eye. Not sunlight reflecting off broken glass, but something cleaner, more purposeful, like the glint of polished metal where no metal should be. 3 kilometers away in the cozy confines of Pinewood Village Library, Bo-ra Park was having her own moment of cosmic significance, though she didn't know it yet. The amateur astronomer had spent the previous night photographing the Perseid meteor shower from the library's small observation deck, and now she hunched over her laptop, reviewing the images with growing confusion. "That's not right," she whispered to herself, zooming in on a photograph taken at 3:47 a.m. Where there should have been empty sky above the research institute, her camera had captured 3 distinct points of light in perfect triangular formation. They weren't meteors. Meteors didn't hover motionless for the 47 minutes between sequential photographs. They weren't aircraft either. She would have heard engines in the mountain stillness. Bo-ra had been tracking unusual celestial phenomena for 15 years, ever since her father had given her his old telescope for her 12th birthday. She knew the difference between atmospheric anomalies, satellite reflections, and camera errors. These lights were none of those things. She pulled up the weather data from the previous night. Clear skies, minimal atmospheric disturbance, no reported aircraft in the area. The lights remained unexplained, hanging in the digital ether of her photographs like a cosmic riddle waiting to be solved. Meanwhile, in a sterile laboratory 800 kilometers away in Seoul, government scientist Tae-min Lee was fielding what he assumed would be another routine call about UFO sightings. The Ministry of Science and ICT received dozens of such reports monthly, usually from enthusiastic civilians who mistook Venus for an alien mothership or weather balloons for interdimensional portals. "Dr. Lee, we have reports from Gangwon Province," his assistant informed him, sliding a thin folder across his desk. "Multiple witnesses, photographic evidence, and some unusual electromagnetic readings picked up by the Chuncheon monitoring station." Tae-min opened the folder with practiced skepticism, expecting to find the usual collection of blurry photographs and breathless testimonies. Instead, he found himself staring at remarkably clear images of the mysterious lights, accompanied by technical data that made his scientific training sit up and take notice. The electromagnetic readings were unlike anything in his database. The signature suggested advanced propulsion technology, but with characteristics that didn't match any known human aircraft. More intriguing still, the pattern of the readings indicated not random occurrence, but systematic, almost methodical activity. "When did these reports come in?" he asked. "This morning, sir. The park ranger who first spotted the anomaly is named Kim Hyun-woo. Very reliable source, according to local authorities. Been working those mountains for years without a single false report." Tae-min leaned back in his chair, studying the data. In his 12 years of investigating unexplained phenomena, he had debunked everything from supposed alien artifacts to mysterious crop circles. But something about this case felt different. The evidence was too clean, too consistent, too technically sophisticated to dismiss easily. What none of these humans realized was that 57 light-years away, the Valkyrie High Council had just concluded their most ambitious xenological project to date. For the past 18 months, Valkyrie scientists had been studying Earth through long-range observation, cataloging human civilization with the methodical precision their species was known for throughout their corner of the galaxy. The Valkyrie were remarkable beings by any measure, Tall, graceful creatures with pale blue skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Their large compound eyes could perceive across 17 different light spectrums, while their elongated fingers could manipulate matter at the molecular level. They had mastered faster than light travel when humans were still discovering fire, and their technology was so advanced it bordered on the miraculous. Yet for all their sophistication, the Velkhari possessed one critical evolutionary quirk. They had developed on a world without predators. Velkaran Prime was a paradise of gentle herbivores and peaceful plant life, where the most dangerous creature was a small, slug-like organism that could barely manage to digest fallen fruit. The Velkhari had never needed to develop fear responses, survival instincts, or tolerance for unpredictable movement patterns. This made them extraordinarily intelligent and peaceful, but also remarkably unprepared for the realities of what galactic xenobiologists called death worlds, planets where evolution had created an endless arms race between predator and prey. Commander Veltar stood in the main observation chamber of the cloaked research vessel, reviewing the final preparations for their ground mission. 49 of his most skilled researchers would establish a temporary base on the planet's surface, close enough to observe human behavior directly, but far enough to avoid detection. It was to be the Velkhari's greatest scientific achievement, the first comprehensive study of a sentient species from a death world. Initial scans confirm the site is optimal, reported his second-in-command, her voice carrying the melodic harmonics typical of their species. The human structure is abandoned, isolated, and equipped with the basic infrastructure we require. Our stealth technology should prevent detection indefinitely. Veltar nodded, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays surrounding them. According to their data, humans were remarkable creatures, capable of surviving in extreme environments, displaying unprecedented technological advancement despite their primitive origins, and showing signs of both individual intelligence and collective cooperation that surpassed most galactic civilizations. They were also, according to all Velkhari calculations, completely harmless to a species as advanced as theirs. The landing was executed with the precision that had made the Velkhari famous throughout their stellar neighborhood. 3 scout ships descended through Earth's atmosphere, using gravitational displacement fields that left no trace on human detection equipment. Within 6 hours, they had established a fully functional research base inside the abandoned Day One Research Institute, their advanced materials seamlessly integrated with the existing human architecture. From Hyunwoo's perspective, the building looked exactly as it always had. The Velkhari's holographic camouflage was perfect, masking the subtle signs of occupancy that might have aroused suspicion. But perfection, as the Velkhari would soon learn, was not the same as completeness. As the alien researchers settled in for their first night of observation, none of them noticed the small gap in their otherwise flawless security perimeter. A ventilation grate on the building's eastern wall, damaged by the previous winter's storms, had been left slightly ajar by the building's original human occupants. It was just large enough for a house spider to slip through, but that would come later. For now, the Velkhari began their work in blissful ignorance, confident that their superior technology and intellect would protect them from any surprises this primitive world might offer. They could not have been more wrong. Dayun Choi had been in the pest control business for 12 years, long enough to know that every call held the potential for surprise. Still, as she pulled her van up to the supposedly abandoned Day One Research Institute on this crisp October morning, something felt distinctly off about the whole situation. The call had come from Hyunwoo Kim, the local park ranger, who insisted he'd been hearing strange mechanical humming from inside the building for 3 nights running. Dayun had dealt with Hyunwoo before. He was thorough, observant, and not given to flights of fancy. If he said something was making noise in an abandoned building, something was making noise. Probably rats in the ventilation system, she muttered to herself, hefting her equipment bag from the van. Or maybe some teenagers set up a gaming station and left their computers running. The building looked exactly as it should. Weathered concrete, darkened windows, weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. But as Da-Yoon approached the main entrance, she noticed details that didn't quite fit. The door, which should have been secured with a heavy padlock she remembered from her last visit 2 years ago, stood slightly ajar. More puzzling still, there were no signs of forced entry, no scratches around the lock, no broken glass. "Hello?" she called out, pushing. The door opened wider. "Facilities management, anyone in here?" The response came not as a voice, but as a barely perceptible shift in the air, as if the building itself had taken a sudden, surprised breath. Dayun paused in the doorway, her professional instincts warning her that something unusual was happening here. Inside the research institute, 49 Velkari scientists froze in perfect, terrified silence. Commander Veltar raised one elongated finger to his lipless mouth, signaling absolute quiet to his team. The human female at their entrance possessed the typical primitive appearance of her species, but Velkari intelligence had warned them about human unpredictability. Their research depended on remaining undetected until they had gathered sufficient behavioral data. "Atmospheric displacement suggests single human entity," whispered his sensor technician, her voice barely audible even to Velkari hearing. "Carrying multiple synthetic containers and metallic implements. Possible threat assessment unknown." Veltar nodded grimly. Humans were known to be tool users, and their implements often served violent purposes. This individual's equipment loadout was concerning. Multiple containers that could contain anything from chemical weapons to biological agents. Dayun, oblivious to the alien panic her presence had caused, stepped into the building's main hallway. The familiar musty smell of abandonment was there, but underneath it lurked something else, something clean and sterile like the inside of a hospital or laboratory. "Definitely someone's been in here," she said aloud, partly to herself and partly to whoever might be listening. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. Ranger Kim just asked me to check for pest problems. If you're squatting here, that's between you and the authorities." She moved deeper into the building, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. What she didn't know was that those footsteps were being tracked by sensors so advanced they could measure the stress patterns in her boot prints, while her every word was being analyzed by xenolinguistic computers that had already cataloged 17 distinct emotional undertones in her speech patterns. The Velkari, meanwhile, were learning their first harsh lesson about human unpredictability. Dayun's calm, professional demeanor fit none of their predictive models for human behavior in potentially threatening situations. According to Velkari psychology, any sentient being discovering an occupied space should display clear aggression or fear responses. This human showed neither, moving through their territory with what appeared to be casual indifference to potential danger. "Behavioral anomaly," noted their chief psychologist. "Human subject displays no recognizable threat assessment protocols. Possible indicators of enhanced combat readiness or psychological instability." Dayun continued her inspection, checking corners and crevices where pests typically gathered. In the main laboratory space, she found clear evidence of recent occupation, subtle signs that someone with scientific training would recognize. Dust patterns suggested equipment had been moved recently, and the air circulation seemed far more efficient than it should be in an abandoned building. "Interesting," she murmured, setting down her equipment bag near what had once been the main workstation. "Someone's definitely using this place." That was when she noticed the spider. It was a perfectly ordinary house spider, Parasteatoda tepidariorum, no bigger than a thumbnail, industriously working on a web in the corner where the wall met the ceiling. Dayun smiled despite herself. After years in pest control, she had developed a grudging respect for spiders. They were excellent at controlling actual pest populations, and this little fellow had probably been keeping the building's insect population in check during its abandonment. "Well, hello there, little guy," she said, pulling out her phone to take a photo. "You've been busy." The spider, completely unaware that its life was about to become cosmically significant, continued its work with the focused determination that had made its species successful for millions of years. Dayun spent another 20 minutes thoroughly inspecting the building, finding no signs of the rats or other pests that might explain the sounds Hyunwoo had reported. The mechanical humming was there, subtle but persistent like the whisper of advanced air circulation systems. Someone was definitely maintaining this facility, though they were being remarkably discreet about it. Must be some kind of off-the-books research project, she concluded, packing up her equipment. Government probably has a team working here and doesn't want publicity. As she prepared to leave, Daun made a decision that would change the course of human history. Her equipment bag, worn from years of use, had developed a small tear in the side pocket. She hadn't noticed when the house spider, curious about this new addition to its territory, had crawled inside to investigate the interesting smells and textures. The Velkari watched through their concealed sensors as the human female gathered her belongings and moved toward the exit. Their relief was palpable. The first successful human encounter had concluded without incident. Their advanced psychology had correctly predicted that humans would eventually lose interest and depart if they found nothing immediately threatening or valuable. Threat assessment concluded, reported their security chief. Human behavior consistent with routine territorial inspection, no indication of discovery or hostile intent. Commander Veltar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was proceeding exactly according to plan. Humans, for all their reputation as an unpredictable species, seemed to follow basic patterns of curiosity and withdrawal when those patterns were properly understood. Daun left the building, drove back to town, and filed her report with Hyunwoo. No pest problems detected. Facility appears to be in use by unknown parties, possibly government researchers. Recommend contacting provincial authorities if investigation is required. What she didn't know was that she had left behind a passenger. The house spider, later to be dubbed Mangchi by the villagers of Pinewood, had found the research institute fascinating. The building's climate-controlled environment was far more comfortable than the harsh outdoor conditions it had evolved to endure. The abundant hiding places, steady air currents, and complete absence of natural predators made it seem like spider paradise. As evening fell, and the Velkari researchers emerged from their hiding places to resume their work, Mangchi began exploring its new territory with the methodical thoroughness that characterized its species. The first Velkari to encounter the spider was a junior researcher named Kilnari, who was calibrating atmospheric sensors near the ventilation system where Mangchi had established its primary web. The young scientist was focused on her instruments when movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. She turned, expecting to see a piece of debris stirred by the air circulation. Instead, she found herself face to face with 8 legs, multiple eyes, and movement patterns that triggered every evolutionary alarm her species possessed. Kilnari's scream shattered the quiet efficiency of the Velkari research station, a sound of pure primordial terror that would have been familiar to any creature that had ever faced a predator. But the Velkari had no context for such fear, no framework for understanding the overwhelming panic that now flooded her nervous system. She collapsed, her consciousness overwhelmed by terror responses that her species hadn't needed for millions of years of evolution. The other Velkari rushed to investigate, only to discover that their most advanced civilization had just encountered its first existential nightmare, a creature perfectly designed by evolution to be everything they feared most. The video that would eventually be studied by xenopsychologists across 3 star systems began innocuously enough. Jin-Ho Park, Bora's 17-year-old brother, had been skateboarding near the old research institute when he spotted what he assumed were foreign scientists through one of the ground floor windows. "Check this out," he whispered to his phone camera, zooming in on the scene inside. "These guys are totally freaking out over a spider." What Jin-Ho's camera captured was 3 tall, pale figures in what appeared to be high-tech hazmat suits, standing frozen around a small corner web. One of them was on the ground, apparently unconscious, while the other 2 maintained an absolutely motionless vigil, as if the spider might attack at any sudden movement. "Dude, it's just a house spider," Jin-Ho narrated, stifling laughter. "These scientists are acting like it's a cobra or something." He posted the 40-second video to his social media with the caption, "Foreign researchers at Old Daewon Building have serious spider phobia, neurophobia. Scientists. Spider scares Tonner Pinewood." Within 6 hours, the video had been shared across every social media platform in Pinewood Village, gathering comments, reactions, and increasingly creative theories about the identity of the mysterious researchers. Soo-Jin Han, the local elementary school teacher, was grading papers in her classroom when her phone buzzed with notifications. She opened Jin Ho's video expecting another of his skateboarding stunts, but instead found herself staring at something that made her teaching experience kick into high gear. "Those aren't hazmat suits," she murmured, studying the figures more carefully. The proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin, with clothing that seemed to shimmer and shift in ways that fabric shouldn't. More disturbing still was their absolute stillness, the kind of frozen terror she'd seen in children confronting their deepest fears. But it was their faces, visible for just a moment when one turned toward the camera, that made Sujin's blood run cold. The features were human-like but wrong, too angular, eyes too large, skin with an otherworldly pallor that spoke of origins far from Earth's sun. "Oh my God," she whispered, taking screenshots and zooming in on the details. "What are you?" Meanwhile, the video's viral spread had caught the attention of someone with both the expertise and compassion to make the situation infinitely worse. Yoonji Kim, a psychology graduate student home for the weekend, and Hyunwoo's younger sister, Yoonji, had specialized in phobia treatment during her studies, particularly exposure therapy for severe anxiety disorders. When she saw Jin Ho's video, her professional instincts overrode any questions about the researcher's unusual appearance. "Poor things," she said to her brother as they sat in their parents' kitchen watching the video for the third time. "They're absolutely terrified. Look at that physiological response. Complete immobilization, hyperventilation. One of them appears to have fainted from panic." Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. Da-eun mentioned the building was being used by some kind of research team. Maybe they're foreign scientists who aren't used to our local wildlife. "Arachnophobia can be completely debilitating," Yoonji continued, her mind already working through treatment possibilities. "But it's also one of the most treatable phobias if approached correctly. We should help them." What neither sibling realized was that their conversation was being monitored by beings whose concept of help was about to be catastrophically redefined. Inside the research institute, Commander Veltar was experiencing what Velkari medical science would later classify as a complete psychological breakdown. The spider, which their xenobiology computers had designated as Specimen Terror 1, had been joined by what appeared to be human agents conducting surveillance. "The young human recorded our response," reported his intelligence officer, her voice trembling with barely controlled panic. "They have documented our vulnerability to their biological weapons." Veltar stared at the holographic replay of Jin Ho's video, watching himself and his team frozen in terror before a creature no larger than his smallest finger. To Velkari psychology, the recording represented something far more sinister than teenage amusement. It was intelligence gathering, proof that humans had identified and were now documenting their species' critical weakness. "Analysis suggests coordinated reconnaissance," continued the intelligence officer. "The human observer positioned himself at optimal viewing angle and maintained focus on our fear responses. This indicates tactical intelligence gathering rather than casual observation." The situation deteriorated further when their monitoring systems detected increased human activity around the building. What the Velkari interpreted as a military response was actually the kindness of small-town community organizing. Yoonji had convinced her psychology study group to help with what she called Operation Spider Therapy. 5 young people, armed, with basic knowledge of exposure therapy and an abundance of good intentions, began planning an intervention for the obviously distressed foreign researchers. "We'll start with photographs," Yoonji explained to her volunteers as they met at the village library. "Show them images of common household spiders from a safe distance. Let them get used to the idea that these creatures are harmless. Then, we can bring some live specimens in controlled environments," added Kyungmin. "Oh, a biology student. Tarantulas are actually very docile, perfect for demonstrating that spiders can be gentle." Bora, who had been following the developing situation, with growing unease, tried to inject a note of caution. "Don't you think we should ask if they want help first? They might be here for reasons that don't include community intervention." But Yoonji's compassion had taken on the unstoppable momentum that characterized her personality. "They're clearly suffering. Sometimes people are too embarrassed to ask for help with phobias. We can approach this sensitively." What none of them knew was that their planning session was being monitored by Velkari surveillance equipment, sophisticated enough to detect conversations through structural vibrations. Every word was being analyzed, translated, and fed into threat assessment algorithms designed by a species that had never encountered genuine human kindness. Biological warfare escalation confirmed, reported the Velkari's chief analyst. Human agents are planning to introduce additional specimens, including references to tarantulas and live specimens in controlled environments. This represents a systematic psychological warfare campaign. Commander Veltar reviewed the intelligence with growing horror. The humans had not only discovered the Velkari presence, but had identified their species' most fundamental vulnerability and were now planning to exploit it with scientific precision. The casual mention of controlled environments suggested military-grade bioweapon deployment capabilities. They speak of approaching this sensitively, noted another analyst. In military contexts, sensitivity refers to intelligence operations designed to avoid detection while maximizing psychological impact. The first phase of what the humans optimistically called Operation Spider Therapy began the next morning when Yunji approached the Research Institute with a folder full of carefully selected spider photographs, ranging from tiny jumping spiders to common garden varieties. From the Velkari perspective, a human psychological warfare specialist had just arrived at their location, carrying detailed intelligence files on various bioweapon configurations. Peaceful contact protocol, Yunji called out as she approached the building, her voice warm with genuine concern. We know you're having trouble with our local wildlife. We're here to help you understand that these creatures are harmless. Inside the institute, absolute panic reigned. The humans were offering to help them understand that their bioweapons were harmless, a statement so psychologically sophisticated that Velkari intelligence computers flagged it as expert-level psychological manipulation. She's offering to demonstrate the creature's capabilities, translated their communications specialist. This is advanced intimidation protocol, assuring victims that weapons are harmless while simultaneously demonstrating control over them. Veltar made a decision that would echo across Velkari strategic doctrine for generations. Prepare defensive countermeasures. The humans have moved to active psychological warfare. We must assume they have additional bioweapons and are testing our responses for future deployment. Yunji, still standing outside the building with her folder of helpful spider photographs, had no idea that her graduate school training in therapeutic intervention had just been classified as an act of war by one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Hello? She called again, her voice carrying the patient, professional tone she'd learned for dealing with severe anxiety cases. We understand you're afraid, but we want to help you overcome that fear. These creatures are actually beneficial. They control pest populations and pose no threat to humans. The nightmare began for the Velkari at precisely 3:17 a.m. on what should have been their most productive research day yet. Their advanced sensors detected movement in the ventilation system, not the random scurrying of a single bioweapon, but the coordinated deployment of multiple units across their entire facility. Mangchi had been busy during the night. What the Velkari didn't understand, what their vast databases of biological knowledge couldn't possibly have prepared them for, was the miracle of spider reproduction. Mangchi hadn't just been building webs, she had been preparing for the future of her species. Her egg sac, carefully constructed in the perfect climate-controlled environment of the alien research station, had finally hatched. 17 tiny spiderlings, each no bigger than a grain of rice, dispersed through the building with the enthusiastic energy of youth and the inherited instincts of millions of years of evolution. To them, the Research Institute was paradise. Warm, dry, full of interesting places to explore, and completely free of the birds, wasps, and other predators that would have claimed most of their siblings in the wild. Research specialist Takmori was the first to encounter what Velkari intelligence would later classify as secondary bioweapon deployment. He had been calibrating atmospheric processors in the Eastern Laboratory when he noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Not one spider, but 3, each moving in different patterns across different surfaces. The Velkari nervous system, evolved on a world where the most dangerous creature could barely digest fruit, simply wasn't equipped to process multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Takmori's consciousness shut down completely, his tall frame collapsing onto the laboratory floor as his brain prioritized survival over function. By dawn, 12 of the 49 Velkari researchers had succumbed to what their medical computers diagnosed as cascading neurological trauma induced by multi-vector predator exposure. The remaining 37 had barricaded themselves in the central command chamber, their advanced technology rendered useless against creatures that measured less than 2 centimeters in length. "We are under siege," Commander Veltar reported to the Velkari High Council via quantum communication. "The humans have escalated to active biological warfare. Multiple bioweapons have been deployed throughout our facility." Meanwhile, in Pinewood Village, the community's well-meaning intervention was entering its second phase. Dong-Hyun Choi, Daeun's 63-year-old father, had spent 40 years in pest control before retiring. When his daughter mentioned the foreign researchers' severe spider phobia, his professional instincts kicked in. "Poor folks," he said, loading his old equipment into his truck. "Probably city people who never learned to live with nature. I'll go have a talk with them, show them there's nothing to fear." Dong-Hyun's approach to pest education had always been hands-on. He arrived at the research institute carrying a clear container with several local spider specimens, planning to demonstrate their harmless nature through direct interaction. What he didn't know was that Velkari surveillance systems had classified his truck as a mobile bioweapon deployment vehicle, based on the pest control equipment visible through the windows. "Advanced tactical deployment detected," reported the Velkari intelligence officer, her voice barely steady. "Human specialist approaching with specialized containment equipment and additional biological specimens. This represents escalation to direct deployment protocols." Dong-Hyun knocked on the door with the patient persistence of someone accustomed to dealing with frightened homeowners. "Hello in there. I'm here about your spider problem. No need to be afraid. These little fellows are more scared of you than you are of them." This statement, processed through Velkari translation algorithms, was interpreted as psychological warfare of the highest order. A threat indicating that the bioweapons were capable of experiencing fear, implying both intelligence and emotional responses that could be exploited for tactical advantage. The situation reached a critical point when Young-Soo Han, Soo-jin's husband, and a local organic farmer, decided to join the community's helpful intervention. Young-Soo had always been passionate about ecological balance, and he saw this as an opportunity to educate outsiders about the beneficial role spiders played in natural pest control. He arrived carrying his pride and joy, a magnificent garden spider that had taken up residence in his greenhouse, a creature he'd named Queen for her impressive size and the way she seemed to rule her web domain. Queen was a perfect specimen of Argiope aurantia, with a body the size of a large grape and legs that spanned nearly 8 centimeters when fully extended. "Beautiful creature," Young-Soo announced cheerfully as he approached the institute, holding Queen's terrarium up to catch the morning light. "See how she's not aggressive at all? Completely harmless to humans." Inside the command chamber, the Velkari sensors registered an approaching bioweapon of unprecedented dimensions. Queen's size triggered every alarm in their threat assessment. Systems, her presence classified as a apex predator deployment that represented an exponential escalation in the human biological warfare campaign. "Emergency protocols," Veltar commanded, his voice breaking with terror. "Prepare for tactical withdrawal. The humans have deployed their primary bioweapon." The breaking point came when Jae-won Park, the village chief, arrived to mediate what he assumed was a simple cultural misunderstanding. Jae-won had dealt with foreign researchers before, and he prided himself on his diplomatic skills. He found Young-Soo and Dong-Hyun standing outside the institute, looking puzzled by the lack of response to their friendly overtures. "Maybe they don't speak Korean very well," Jae-won suggested, approaching the building's intercom system. "Let me try English." What emerged from the speakers was Jae-won's well-intentioned but grammatically imperfect English. "Hello, foreign science people. Village want help you with spider scary. We bring spider show you not dangerous. Please come out for friendship. Spider education." The Velkari translation computers, designed to process dozens of galactic languages, struggled with Jaewon's enthusiastic broken English. The phrase, "spider scary," was interpreted as a designation, possibly a code name for their bioweapon program. Friendship Spider education was classified as indoctrination protocol, designed to normalize bioweapon acceptance. Most terrifying of all was the phrase, "please come out," which their analysis flagged as a direct tactical demand for surrender and exposure to the deployed bioweapons. Commander Veltar stared at the holographic displays showing the humans gathered outside their facility. 3 human agents, multiple bioweapon containers, and what appeared to be a diplomatic envoy demanding their submission to spider education. According to every tactical analysis in Velkhari military doctrine, they were facing a coordinated, psychological warfare campaign of unprecedented sophistication. "They're demanding we expose ourselves to their bioweapons," he reported to the High Council. "This is beyond conventional warfare. They're attempting complete psychological domination through weaponized phobia induction." Dr. Aaron Kim, the village veterinarian, chose that moment to arrive for what she assumed would be a routine wellness check on the foreign researchers. Someone had mentioned they seemed unwell, possibly suffering from severe anxiety, and her medical training compelled her to offer assistance. She brought her portable medical kit and a translator app on her phone, prepared to bridge any language barriers that might be preventing proper medical care. What she found was a scene that challenged her understanding of normal human behavior. 3 local men standing outside a building, holding containers of spiders, speaking loudly in multiple languages at what appeared to be an empty building. No response from inside, despite clear signs that the facility was occupied and powered. "This is strange," she murmured, pulling out her medical scanner to check for signs of distress from whoever was inside. The device, designed to detect human vital signs through walls for emergency situations, registered multiple life forms with elevated stress indicators that were off any scale she'd ever seen. "Heart rates over 200 BPM, she said, staring at the readings in disbelief. "Breathing patterns suggesting severe panic attacks. There are people in there having medical emergencies." Her attempt to provide emergency medical assistance was the final straw for Velkhari psychological endurance. The appearance of another human with scanning equipment was interpreted as medical reconnaissance, gathering biological data on their physiological responses to bioweapon exposure for optimization of future attacks. "They're documenting our biological responses," whispered the Velkhari medical officer. "This is systematic torture protocols. They're studying how we react to their weapons." As Aaron knocked on the door, calling out in her most professional medical voice, "Hello, I'm a doctor. I'm detecting medical emergencies inside. Please let me help you." The Velkhari made their final, desperate decision. The end of humanity's first interstellar war began with the laughter of an 8-year-old boy. Chan-Woo Lee had been walking to school with his backpack bouncing and his pet tarantula's terrarium carefully balanced in his small hands when he spotted the crowd gathered around the old research institute. His teacher, Soo-Jin Han, had mentioned something about helping some scared foreign scientists, and Chan-Woo's young mind immediately connected this with his upcoming show-and-tell presentation. "Perfect," he announced to his tarantula, a docile, Chilean rose hair named Buddy. "These science people will love to meet you." Chan-Woo had raised Buddy from a spiderling, bottle-feeding the creature and treating it with the casual affection most children reserved for puppies. To him, Buddy was simply a quiet pet that required minimal care and occasionally shed its skin in fascinating ways. The concept that anyone might find his gentle companion terrifying was as foreign to Chan-Woo as the idea that gravity might work backward. Inside the research institute, the final 37 surviving Velkhari researchers huddled in their command chamber, monitoring the approaching human through sensors that registered Buddy as a bioweapon of apocalyptic proportions. The tarantula's size, nearly 12 centimeters of leg span, classified it as what Velkhari military doctrine termed a planet killer class biological agent. "Commander," whispered their sensor technician, her voice barely audible through the terror. "The approaching human appears to be a juvenile. It's carrying the largest bioweapon yet deployed." Commander Veltar stared at the holographic display, showing Chan-Woo's cheerful approach his young face bright with excitement at meeting new people. According to every principle of Velkari psychology, the deployment of bioweapons by juveniles represented the ultimate in psychological warfare, using the appearance of innocence to deliver maximum traumatic impact. Emergency evacuation, Veltar commanded, his voice breaking. All personnel to emergency transport. Authorization code. Existential threat confirmed. Chan Wu knocked on the door with the enthusiastic energy that characterized his approach to most things in life. "Hello, I heard you're scientists. I brought my pet spider to show you. His name is Buddy and he's super friendly." The words super friendly triggered every alarm in the Velkari translation systems. Their computers had already cataloged this phrase pattern. Humans consistently described their most lethal bioweapons as friendly, harmless, and beneficial. The psychological sophistication was beyond anything in their xenological databases. "Look," Chanwu continued, holding up Buddy's terrarium to the nearest window. "He's molting soon. Wanna see?" Through the reinforced barriers of their command chamber, 37 of the galaxy's most advanced scientists watched an 8-year-old human casually handle what their analysis classified as a perfect killing machine. The child showed no fear, no protective equipment, no awareness that he was manipulating a creature whose very existence defied Velkari understanding of biological possibility. "Tactical assessment," Veltar requested, his voice mechanical with shock. "The juvenile shows complete dominance over the apex bioweapon," reported his analyst. "No protective protocols, direct physical contact, casual manipulation of the creature's behavior. This indicates genetic conditioning or neurological modification beyond our current understanding." What they were witnessing, though they couldn't know it, was simply the result of evolution on a world where humans had learned to coexist with creatures that would give nightmares to half the galactic community. Chanwu's casual comfort with Buddy represented millions of years of adaptation that had taught humans to live alongside nature's most efficient predators. The evacuation began with the kind of precision that had made Velkari technology legendary. Across their corner of the galaxy, emergency protocols activated, dimensional barriers collapsed, and quantum transport systems initialized for immediate departure. 49 researchers and their entire scientific mission reduced to a panicked retreat that would be studied in Velkari military academies for generations, but precision and panic make poor companions. In their haste to escape what they perceived as humanity's ultimate biological warfare demonstration, the Velkari made the kind of mistake that legends are built on. They left something behind. Dr. Si-Young Park, the village doctor, had been walking to her morning house calls when she noticed the unusual activity around the research institute. The gathered crowd, the excited 8-year-old with his pet tarantula, and the complete lack of response from the supposedly occupied building triggered her medical instincts. "Has anyone actually seen these researchers?" she asked Jaewon Park, pulling out her medical scanner again. "Because I'm reading life signs that are unusual." The scanner, designed to detect human vital signs for emergency medical response, was registering biological patterns unlike anything in its database. Heart rhythms too rapid for human physiology, breathing patterns that suggested respiratory systems with more chambers than mammalian lungs, and body temperatures that indicated a completely different metabolic baseline. "These aren't human readings," she murmured, studying the data with growing excitement and alarm. "These are readings from something else." At that precise moment, the air above the research institute shimmered with what would later be described as a heat mirage effect. 3 objects that definitely weren't aircraft rose silently from the building, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that made them difficult to focus on directly. Chan Wu pointed upward with delighted excitement. "Cool. Are those drones? Is this a technology demonstration?" What Chan Wu had witnessed was the emergency evacuation of humanity's first alien visitors, traumatized into retreat by his pet tarantula and the accumulated horror of 3 days in a world where apex predators were considered household companions. The Velkari ships climbed through Earth's atmosphere at velocities that should have created sonic booms but somehow didn't, their stealth technology functioning perfectly right up until the moment they cleared the planet's gravitational field and transmitted their final report to the Velkari High Council. Evacuation complete, Commander Veltar reported, his voice carrying the hollow tone of a being who had witnessed the impossible. Earth is designated as a Level 12 existential threat. Recommend immediate galactic quarantine protocols. Level 12? Questioned the High Council representative. Commander, Level 12 is reserved for species capable of weaponizing their planet's most dangerous predators. Surely, I have witnessed juveniles of their species casually manipulating apex bioweapons with no protective equipment, Veltar interrupted. They deploy these creatures as pets and describe them as friendly. Their biological warfare capabilities exceed our ability to classify or counter. The representative paused, accessing Velkari military databases. Level 12. Had never been assigned to any known species. It was a theoretical classification, reserved for civilizations so advanced in biological warfare that they could make their planet's deadliest creatures into willing allies. Are you certain of this assessment? I am certain, Veltar replied, that humanity represents everything our species is not equipped to face. They have achieved symbiosis with perfect predators. They show no fear response to creatures that caused complete psychological breakdown in our research team. They approach biological warfare as a form of friendship. But the Velkari had left something behind in their panic, something that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. In the abandoned research institute, Dr. C. Young Park made the discovery that would launch human civilization into the interstellar age. Hidden behind Velkari holographic camouflage that was now failing without maintenance, she found technology that shouldn't exist. Quantum computers, atmospheric processors, and most significantly, a communication device still broadcasting on frequencies that Earth's radio telescopes had never detected. Yunwu, she called to the park ranger, her voice shaking with excitement and disbelief. I think you need to contact the government. We have a situation that's significantly bigger than pest control. As government scientists began arriving to study the abandoned alien technology, the people of Pinewood Village gradually realized they had been participants in something unprecedented. Jinho's viral video took on new significance as humanity's first documentation of extraterrestrial contact. Yunji's psychology training became the foundation for the field of interspecies psychological warfare. Youngsu's greenhouse spider became the subject of xenobiological studies across 3 continents, and Chanwu's pet tarantula, Buddy, earned the distinction of being the first Earth creature to successfully defend the planet from alien invasion. 6 months later, the Velkari report had circulated throughout their interstellar neighbors. Earth was officially classified as a death world with confirmed bioweapon integration capabilities. The warning spread through galactic civilization with the efficiency of natural selection. Any species with similar phobias to the Velkari gave humanity's solar system a very wide berth.